What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about The Land Before Time. Directed by John Bluth, who's directed films like Anastasia, Thumbelina, The Pebble and the Penguin, and American Tail, and written by people by Stu Krieger, Judy Fruedberg, and Tony Geis. The Land Before Time is a movie from 1988 starring people like Gabriel Damon, Helen Shaver, Pat Hingle, Judith Barcy, Will Ryan, Candace Hudson, and many others. Has a fantastic score from James Horner and deals with so many things like prejudice and just is a good family film from the late 80s. Welcome guys to my review series for The Land Before Time, and I'm very happy to be joined in this video by my buddy Mike from Did You See That to revisit an old childhood classic of my life, a film that I saw so many times growing up, but I was completely surprised to see that this franchise has accumulated 14 films altogether. I can probably tell you confidently that I've seen maybe 2 or 3 of these films in totality, with the first one being the one that I saw countless times as a kid and is the reason that I was inspired to do this series. I wanted to revisit the original film as it was something that always kind of tugged at my hearts to revisit, as it's been quite some time since I've seen The Land Before Time. But as a kid, I saw this movie all the time. I was born in 1993, so obviously this movie came out a decent amount of years before my birth, but around that time in the mid to late 90s and the early 2000s, there were still a lot of films from the 80s and 90s and early 90s that were consistently being circulated on TV or were just kind of part of the bundle of VHSs that you had at home. And so this is a movie that I've been dying to go back and revisit, and has a really impressive producer list with people like Kathleen Kennedy, George Lucas, Frank Marshall, Steven Spielberg, and utilizes a mostly child cast to tell its story, and tells a pretty straightforward narrative of a young boy named Littlefoot, who's a Brontosaurus, who's separated from his family, specifically his grandmother and his grandfather, after his mother passes away in a tragic instance where all of the dinosaurs have been separated. There's a huge earthquake that separates the lands, that separates the grounds, it separates all these people from their loved ones. Some loved ones die, and in the middle of all this as well, Littlefoot's mom is also protecting him and a young Triceratops girl named Sarah from a T-Rex. So in classic old 2D animation movie format, we have a mother or a parent in this film being killed off pretty immediately, setting off the kind of inciting incident that would make our lead character have to go on and find himself. Going back and revisiting this film, I will say overall that the film is far more simplistic than I remember. It's always so interesting how as kids we watch movies and we add more layers to the movie than there actually is. That's not to say that this movie is bland or hollow, but that it is a shorter, straight to the point, very easy breezy watch. There isn't a whole lot to this movie. There isn't this rich layer of a really deep narrative here. There are some really good themes and messages here dealing with prejudice, as all the different dinosaurs at the beginning of the movie are set up to be, various species that don't speak to one another. You have the long necks that do not speak to, the three horns, and so on and so forth. And over the course of the film, because of this separation of the lands and all of these dinosaurs, these young dinosaurs being separated, they all have to work together as a unit to find their way back to their families. And that's essentially what this movie is all about. A group of different kinds of dinosaurs utilizing their own skills to benefit one another and support one another in using their own benefits and their own skills and what comes from them being who they are to kind of help in the journey as well. It's a movie that really at its core is about the fact that we all may be different, we all may be better at different things, but if we work together, we can usually get the job done a lot better than if we don't work together at all. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and pass on the floor to my buddy Mike from Did You See That? Again, a big thanks to him for joining me on this 14 movie venture. Yeah, let's go ahead and keep on with this. Mike, what are your thoughts on this movie?
And I'm back! I'm Planet Perez, and man, thank you so much for having me onto your channel once again. And this time, you've set me a big task in this project of, I think, 14 movies. So this is going to be a blast, because the series that Anthony has chose out for me this time is The Land Before Time. Now, anyone who's watching this review, you may have seen this movie countless times as a kid, or even as an adult. This may still be one of your favourite animated movies. However, this is my first ever experience of a movie that was released on November 18th in 1988, The Land Before Time, which I have got to say, it's got one of the most impressive lists for executive producers ever. You've got Frank Marshall here, Kathleen Kennedy, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg. Now, if you can have some big names in cinema executive produce your movies, I think some of those names are going to be on your list. So that itself is an impressive feat alone. The director of this is Don Bluth, if I've got that correctly, who I think this is kind of his biggest project that he's ever done. And then the music is by James Horner, who did die in around 2015 time, I believe. And that guy has so many impressive scores and soundtracks. I could honestly not list them all, because you'd have to go look them up yourselves, because every decade he provided such brilliant soundtracks for the movie, and that is no different here, because let's just get straight into it. The Land Before Time was a great movie. I admired the 2D animation that was on show here. It really kind of took me back to my childhood experiencing this for the first ever time. Literally just finished it today as I'm recording this review, May 17th. Yeah, it's crazy to think that the 2D animation has changed so much over the years, but having a reminder like this really is gracefully appreciated, because I remember a lot of these animated movies from when I was a kid and when I was younger, and this was what was shown to me, this kind of animation style. And as I've grown older, of course, now we've got a lot of 3D animation and the craft is done so differently. But having a movie like this to remind you of how it was is just so nostalgic and so memorable. It's a very pleasant watch. And one of the biggest aspects I've got to give praise to right out of the bat of this movie is the score by James Horner. It is beautifully, masterfully, so well done. Just the range of emotion that's provided really had me want to listen to this soundtrack by itself without even watching the movie, because whether it is the tones setting up for this beautiful atmospheric world of the dinosaurs, or whether it's the tone of the mixed emotional beats that we feel throughout, whether it is a heartfelt moment, whether it's a moment of, like, say, bullying, so there's a bit tensions there, whether it's a reunited moment, all that score throughout is so beautifully done and so just kind of calming and relaxing at the same time, if that makes sense. At least that's how I felt, and I very much enjoyed that. And also, the voice casting here is done pretty well. I've got a list of the voice casting right here because I don't know their names, so I'm just going to have to kind of read them off. So we've got Gabriel Damon, who voices Littlefoot, our main character, who does a fantastic job, by the way. We've got Candice Hudson, who plays Sarah, Judith Barcy as Ducky, and Will Ryan as Petrie. The voice casting is great all around it. I think they do a terrific job, and I believe this is the only movie that all of them voice cast those roles. I might be wrong on that one, but I do know that this is the main movie that has the executive producers of, you know, the list that I mentioned before, because I know from after this point, they're all direct to video or DVD sequels, which is kind of crazy to think that is the case of how well this movie also performed at the box office. If I'm going to go into any negatives, for me, the character of Sarah was a flat out bitch. She really, really was, because there was never a moment in this movie I liked her character. I get why she was there, and I get why she kind of had a bit of like an attitude problem as such. I'm team Littlefoot. But yeah, so that voice casting, again, it was a good job by the actress, but I wasn't a fan of the character. And I would say that if you're going into this movie for the first ever time, where I'm 31 years old in 2022 checking out this 1988 movie, it's very cutesy movie for kids, for sure. If it has some themes in here that can be taken away from kids and adults, like prejudice, again, emotional ranges, the bullying as such, for example, feeling like you don't belong in life as such, or at least with other groups, about like the prejudice. So it's got some great messaging in here, but it's a very cutesy kind of movie, and I feel like not every adult is going to enjoy that, especially if you kind of try compare this to the animation now. It's completely different. It's not fair to do that, but I know some people may try to, So yeah, wrapping this up, I'm going to hand it straight back over to Anthony because I feel like I've taken up a bit much time than I wanted to. But Anthony, thank you so much for having me on for this movie. I very much enjoyed it, and definitely one day if I ever have kids, this is a movie that I am going to be showing them. But back over to you, my man, and your remaining thoughts on The Land Before Time.
A big thanks to Mike for joining me here in the first installment of The Land Before Time. Again, we're going to be covering all 14 movies, and I've only seen maybe the first 2 or 3. Maybe I've seen 4 of them. Who knows? But I certainly have not seen anywhere close to 10 of them, and I've certainly not seen anywhere close to 14 of them. So where this franchise could go in even just a few more movies, I don't know. I remember that there's a small purple T-Rex that shows up at some point that gets separated from his T-Rex parents, and it's kind of a message about, who you are based on who you're programmed to be versus if, you're young and you don't have those things instilled in you yet, and you meet other young dinosaurs who don't have those things instilled in them either, that you can grow together versus growing to be one another's enemy. That's what I remember from that film, but it's been a very long time. I don't even know if that's the next one, the third one, the fourth one. We will see. I hope you guys will stick around for this adventure, and please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and comment your thoughts on this series. Which is your favorite in the series, which is not your favorite in the series, all that jazz. I hope you guys will stick around for that. Now, with that said, yeah, getting further into my thoughts on this movie, this is a really well animated film that just has that 2D animated charm that you just don't see in movies these days. Of course, by a lot of modern standards, there are elements of this film that don't look phenomenal, even based on the standards of what we would start to see in the 90s with Disney's Renaissance phase, with everything from The Little Mermaid to Tarzan, The Lion King, Mulan. Of course, 2D animation would have a huge leap in its technological elements moving forward in just the next decade or so, but just looking to 1988, this movie has a very specific charm. And if you look at those films that I listed off that this director Don Bluth has directed, Anastasia, An American Tail, The Pebble and the Penguin, all very charming 2D animated films of their time that of course have been left behind in terms of feeling a little bit dated, but for the most part really have something that gives them a unique feel and vibe. And though this film may have a pretty simple narrative at its core and kind of comes to a conclusion a lot faster than you may remember it having come to a conclusion, overall I had a lot of fun with it going back and revisiting it. I found that the animation was a lot of fun to just see and be able to watch a nice, good quality 2D animated film from this time. I haven't watched an animated film from the 80s in quite some time, so going back and revisiting it, it felt like my childhood. The music from James Horner in this film is phenomenal. He gives a great score from beginning to end that really leans into these moments, and all the dinosaurs are so cute. The character designs themselves are so well done. Everybody is so well defined, and even though the characters and the story is a little bit hollow at times and pretty straightforward, they all have their moments to shine. And by the time the movie was over, the only character that I really dislike is the character of Sarah, the Triceratops, because she's just an outright bitch. There's no getting around it. She's a horrible, horrible, mean character. And I'm really, really hoping that by the time the movie comes to an end, or the series comes to an end, that she's had some sort of growth, and that it isn't the case of her being kind of like Ashley Tisdale's character in the High School Musical films, where she's a horrible, horrible bitch the entire series, but at the end of each movie, they kind of pity her and include her in the friend or family affairs. I have a feeling that's the direction we're going to head with her character, but I'm just not sure just yet. I don't really remember what happens with her character moving forward, but I'm hoping she has some sort of character growth and is not a complete and utter bitch as she continues to move forward in this franchise. As for now, yeah, she's just annoying and she just gets in the way, and the movie tries to make you feel for her because you can tell that she's acting tougher than she actually is. She's putting up a persona that has been instilled in her from her parents. But at the end of the day, I don't really feel like she learns a whole lot other than realizing that what she's doing is not getting her anywhere and she's going to be left alone. And even though she's been horrible to everybody that's a part of this group, Littlefoot, Ducky, and Petrie, and all of them, she's still is accepted by them, and they still bring her in and include her in the situation, even if she doesn't necessarily deserve it. With all of that said, though, by the time you get to the end, it's a nice heartfelt family film that I think really tugs on the heartstrings. There are some really sad moments in the film, specifically around Littlefoot's mother's death and his journey to want to, find his family. This movie overall does touch on life and death and the hardships of that, and that's something I kind of miss that you don't really see in a lot of modern day films. They may touch on death in a lot of animated movies today, for sure, and some big themes. There are animated films that are still pushing the boundaries when it comes to that. But back in the day, these movies were all really heavy-handed on the idea of a child or somebody losing their parent, and this movie very much leans heavy into that idea and what it is that we have to do moving forward when we do lose somebody in our life, and how they are always truly with us, and that they're only ever really gone if you forget what they taught you. So that's going to be my thoughts on The Land Before Time. I had a lot of fun going back and revisiting it. The animation is a little dated by today's standards, even by 2D modern day standards, but there's a charm to the animation, the hand-drawn animation of this time, that just cannot be replicated. It was just done so differently back then, and without a doubt, it's one of the things that makes this film stand the test of time. Its look is so consistent and so well done. The music is fantastic. The voice acting is really good. I love the use of young children for a lot of the dinosaurs, because it does give a far more realistic kind of take to these kids actually being kids. They feel and sound like kids. With that said, this movie may not work for everybody. If you're an adult, you may not be crazy about this. You may not be, in your 40s thinking, hey, Anthony says The Land Before Time is great, let me go check it out. You may not love it. I recognize that this is a nostalgic watch for me, and it was interesting to get somebody in my similar age group to check it out with Mike. So if you're older and you enjoy this film, I would love to hear your thoughts down below. If you're younger and you enjoy this film, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And maybe you don't enjoy this film at all. Maybe you have the hot take that this is just one of those classic animated films that you just never understood the hype around. I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say, so please leave any and all those comments down below. I find this to be a really solid film that I highly recommend, and it's something that I think that parents today should still pass along to their kids, even if it isn't as well made as something like an Encanto these days. I think it's equally as charming for its time, and I think it's got a really good message about family, prejudice, and loss of the loved ones in our lives. A big thanks to you guys for watching once again, and I'll see you guys in the next one. You guys can find the link to Mike's channel down below in the description box. Go give him some love, let him know I sent you, and all right, I'll leave you alone now. Bye-bye.